Hello and welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. This is our February 2024 community chat, where we invite members of the Caribbean tech community to join us in discussing ICT-related topics or issues, thus allowing them to share their own unique perspectives. Joining me today, we have Nerissa Golden, who is no stranger to the show. Nerissa is the CEO of Goldenmedia and the managing editor of Discover Montserrat, and she's also a published author. And we also have Gregory Domond, an ICT consultant based in Haiti. Gregory has worked closely with the local regulator, and he also lectures and leads PromoTIC, a technology firm that promotes and supports the use of ICTs in Haiti. Nerissa, Gregory, welcome back.
Great to be here, Michelle. Hello, Gregory. Nice to meet you.
Hello, Michelle. Narissa. Nice to meet you.
Okay, so in this community chat, we'll be discussing three topics: governments, influencers, and content marketing. The second one, telecommunications network and infrastructure resilience and assessments. And finally, regulating digital media. So we'll start off with governments, influencers, and content marketing. And Nerissa, I'll start with you. Caribbean governments often seem to be above the fray of trends of what might be considered trendy. And regarding public engagement, there is often the attitude of we need the government more than they need us. Their websites are poorly maintained and not very user-friendly, and it can be difficult to get information, etc. Although the private sector, for example, has embraced the use of social media and even to some degree influencers, our governments tend to be nowhere near to doing so. What do you think about that, and where can we go from here?
Well, Michelle, especially this year where we're going to see more than, I think it's 60% of the world going to the elections, we are going to see governments online using social media to tell us who to vote for. But we also notice they go pretty quiet after that. Once they're in power, they don't see the same impetus to use it to really keep the public informed. And I think that's something that is a missed opportunity, especially in the region. If we really believe that our countries are democratic and we do want more public involvement, I think we need to deploy new strategies, including the use of influencers to be able to share information and to basically get public support for the initiatives that are important to moving our country and our development forward.
Indeed. Gregory, what say you?
Yeah, I think social media are very used by political leaders and governments to inform people, but they have to use it in the best way so that they can build people instead of creating bad conditions.
Well, that's true. But there is one of the things that I felt as you were speaking, though, especially with social media, is that we tend to view a lot of stuff, and therefore maybe it can be useful for getting information, but I don't know about engagement. I don't know if you have any sort of thoughts about whether or not social media in particular is good to get views of individuals or to have conversations, because I think a lot of us, we scroll, we may like something, but we don't necessarily comment, and the sort of interaction among viewers and users may be relatively limited.
I actually disagree there. I think there is a lot of engagement on social, especially if you're looking within community groups. So for instance, I can use Montserrat, but I tend to check other islands as well to see what's happening. So if you check you have to look around those core media pages, and sometimes they're not official media houses. They could be somebody in that island that has that has a voice on the island, and they've been able to kind of be the person that's always in the know about what's happening. And so you will find a lot of discussion within there. And I think the missed opportunity for government is that they should be listening. They should be doing some social listening, not to see who's bad mounting them, but to understand what is the pulse of the people as it relates to this topic or the next, and how can we then use that little community to maybe re-educate them so that then they can share that information out to the public. And I think that's one of the opportunities that they are lacking. When I talk about influencers, we're not necessarily talking about people with 100,000 fans even. It could be somebody, a micro-influencer, it could be 1,000 followers, but it's just that they have a voice that is respected. And with a little bit of information, you could get them on their side. I think often when you see the negativity coming against government is because they have done a very good job of keeping us as outsiders. And so we naturally assume they must be doing something wrong because we don't trust politicians, but rather if we allowed more involvement, more education, more information sharing, and we use people who are familiar to us to be able to say, hey, this is what this is about. This is why you need to speak up. This is why they're asking your opinion on this consultation, I think we would see a different result. It's also important sometimes to get ahead of the issues. If you look at what happened with COVID, very early, the negative, the worst of the worst, we saw that was prevalent on all of the social media, even ahead of vaccines being developed and things like that. So by the time governments and health departments were now trying to say, please take the vaccine, the voices of the negative were much louder, and nobody was planning to do that because, no, this isn't good. This isn't a good idea. Versus if we understand the influence that we can have on these sources in the same way you used it to help you get voters, think how you can use that same platform to educate people about what's happening, what's going to happen, what could happen, and allow them to make more informed decisions.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, even here in Jamaica, we had, we're in the process of what they call local government elections. So nomination day was the 8th. And preceding that, on the other occasion when I'm on Instagram or something, I saw some, national political leaders having various, posts and video reels talking about the achievement of the government and all of this sort of thing. So you realize, though, that it can, especially for a lot of the elected officials who already have been developing their social media presence, that now that we're probably getting into election season, that they're leveraging that. And perhaps I wondered, though, in terms of how you think social media rates against traditional media, maybe in terms of access and influence, because one can say prior to us getting so much on board social media, you'd have to be channeling a lot of that sort of election campaigning through the press, buying ads on TV and radio and this sort of thing. But now that elected officials or potential prospective elected officials can use social media, create a social media account and create the content that they want. How do you think it sort of matches up whether or not pros and cons or what you're seeing as it relates to social media versus traditional media in that space?
I think what I love about the Caribbean is that you see all traditional and digital existing together. And in fact, they support each other, because it'd be very easy for a politician or anyone to do a radio program and say, go to my Facebook account and leave me a comment to tell me where you're watching from. So it may not be an active call in program, but I could ask you to go to my account, like my page, leave a comment under the live video, because maybe I'm sharing it there, or maybe I've asked you to leave questions on my social media that I'm then integrating into the online conversation. So I think they work hand in hand. And of course, social is good because then you're able to collect data. It also means that you will find that although you will find our radio stations are online, some stations may have a limited bandwidth of streams, that a number of people who could listen at any one time. Being able to send that same stream out to social media means that suddenly it's an unlimited amount of people who can log on. And we know that diaspora is very key to how decisions are even made in our home countries. That influence the conversations, their perspectives are also considered when, even in our elections and things like that. So I think it's important to have that kind of global engagement. And that is what digital platforms brings to the game. But I definitely think we know it's good for elections. And you mentioned about the politicians who have built their platform before. That for me those are the people for me that I think have a better shot of winning, because if they have learned to be consistent about sharing what they've been doing, I'm not waiting to see your long list of 50 things that you did while over the last 4 or 5 years. I have been watching you consistently share with me what you've been doing, what the people in your ministry, your departments have been doing that's bringing impact. I think that's better storytelling for me. And that's the kind of thing when I talk about content marketing. And I just don't want to see from the political level. I don't just want to see the ministers doing it, but actually those senior officials within our departments should also be seeing it as a tool to be able to actively talk to the people about why they're making the decisions and how these things are impacting the communities and individuals.
Yes.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think social media can create engagement because the citizens may feel that they are part of this. They are involved directly in the process. When you compare this with traditional media, radio or TV, so they are like they receive something only and they can't react. Mm-hmm. But in this, they are involved. Their voice can be heard, and their proposal can be implemented. So that's why users are more likely to use social media because they feel that they are part of the process.
Indeed. Gregory, in Haiti, I don't know what has been the sort of use of social media, especially in politics, elections, in disseminating information. I know that there were, at least I'm aware of one or two Haitian who are very prominent on social media, especially Twitter, like I think Mark Allen Bosiclo.
Yeah.
But I don't know if, and I think I recall that he used to do like a show on Twitter, I think every Tuesday or sometime once a week. But I don't know whether or not there are others who are as prominent and how they use it, or even whether the government uses social media as well.
Yes, the government use it, but within the social level, the society, there are few people who use it for political purposes, but most of the young people, they use it for their own usage, because they don't use it to make marketing, to do something else. They use it, they consume. They are consumers. They are looking pictures, videos. That's all. Yeah, for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the sad things about especially the region is that we're still primary consumers of content versus using it to create and to share. Very, very powerful mediums that we could literally transform our communities, even our own careers, if we were to use it more impactfully. And I think that's one of the reasons I would love to see more governments actually model that. Because then when you begin to show those individual stories, those success stories, you begin to then give people that comfort and awareness that, oh, I can actually use this to do that. And it doesn't need to be something that, it doesn't need to be very slick and polished, because young people will tell you that one of the reasons they love TikTok is that it is not slick and polished. You could feel the authenticity of that person using the space that they have to do something. So it's not that we're expecting them now to expend big sums of money on creating all this content. We just need you to share content. We just need you to talk to us about what's happening. It's having a minister turn on his phone because he's going to a local food expo, and he's talking to the people. And you're seeing that minister connect with, his constituents and talking to them about their journey in the business or whatever. That makes a big difference, and I think we just need to see more of that. And I think it will definitely trickle down into then what your people do as well, when they see that you are not creating these barriers of information, but you're willingly giving them access to what's happening from their perspective.
Indeed.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Gregory. Go ahead.
Yes, I do agree with you, Nerissa, because in Haiti, I haven't seen one minister or someone in the government use the social network to interact with people. They are still attached to the traditional media. So it's a way to be closer to the young, to the population. So it's a good idea. I share it.
Yeah. I was actually going to say something similar. As Nerissa was talking, I was thinking about here in Jamaica now. I mean, I'm not necessarily somebody who is frequenting social media, constantly throughout the day. But I was thinking about, for example, the Ministry of Health had a campaign about knowing your numbers. So, especially due to our health challenges in the Caribbean. So whether it's, hypertension and, diabetes and so on, and your weight and blood pressure and all of these sorts of things. So they had this campaign about knowing your numbers. And I'm not sure the extent to which they use social media to convey the message, but you also recognize that it could have been a very powerful medium to do so, because sometimes, especially I think with governments and ministries, as you said, Nerissa, they want the slickness, and you go to the, like a major marketing agency and you give them how many, hundreds of thousands of dollars to put these campaigns together. But the thing though with social media oftentimes is what they need is regular or even frequent updates, and the budgets really can't cater to that. So,
Right.
but as you say, you don't necessarily need slick. All you basically need is some thoughtful content that can be recorded, almost at any time. So
right. And if you create, fine, we understand it's government, so you want to have some structures through which everyone does present the information. But if you just create a framework within how you want to share information, and you actively encourage the people in your team to share information about this is how this works, this is what we do. And of course you can review it. So it does not, and remember, live doesn't have to be live, right? So we can pre-record it and then put it back and just make sure it's assessed and whatever. But it's the feeling of closeness and connectivity that we need to do. We need to remove that barrier, and social media allows a lot of that, so that we can create more engagement. Because what is happening is after elections, I vote and then I go off and I leave the ministers to their will, and I can 5 years and they ask me for my vote again. No, we want to create a situation where our people are very aware, because when we are not aware, then decisions are happening around us and we don't understand that they're impacting us. And then by the time we figure out what decisions have been made, it's too late. And we haven't shared our voice. Yes, we're consumed with all of this content we can get online, but most times we're not paying attention to it because we just think it's just another talking head, which is why I said incorporating people like with more influence, people outside of those usual traditional government information units who would be able to turn on a particular community to understanding what's happening in this industry, whether it's the farming sector, your fishermen, your young entrepreneurs. You're able to connect with them closer and be able then to get their input when you're making policies from the jump versus later on. Also, I think it also then creates the opportunity for more people to be involved, because you knows that every department has their list. And they've got their list of 20, 30, maybe 100 people that they call whenever something. And so we recycle the same set of people for every opportunity, every survey, everything. And that means you already know the answers you're going to get. Social gives us the chance to reach people outside who we wouldn't usually connect to, but we really need to include their voice in the decisions that we're making.
Yes, definitely. I think we're going to leave this topic and move on to the second one, which is telecommunications networks and infrastructure resilience assessments. And Gregory, when you were last on the podcast in 2021, we were discussing the impact on Haiti's telecommunications infrastructure of the earthquake on the 14th of August that year that measured 7.2 on the Richter scale. And soon thereafter, on August 16th, Tropical Depression Grace hit the country as well. Now, recently we have had reports of extensive riots in Haiti, which would have disrupted everyday life and the provision of various services. So just start us off with this topic. What might be some of the few things that Caribbean countries can learn from Haiti's experience?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle, for this opportunity to share my thoughts on this. After the last earthquake that hit Haiti in August 2021, so I was in charge for ITU and Conatel to firstly for ITU to assess the damages caused by the earthquake on the networks and infrastructure of telecommunication in Haiti. I remember I I did a podcast with you on this. So after that, I was recruited by ITU to assess the level of resilience of networks and infrastructure of telecommunication in Haiti. Yeah, this assessment was completed and submitted for implementation because there were some recommendations. So the lessons learned are that Haiti and other Caribbean countries are exposed to some recurring natural disasters like hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, landslides, and they are also exposed to tsunami and volcanic activities. So there were recommendations for all stakeholders. I mean, the operators, the access providers, radio, and the regulator, and the ministry itself, and the ministry in charge of the sector. So at the end, ITU and Conatel were organizing a workshop to share the recommendations with the stakeholders. The good news is that all the stakeholders agreed to set up a multi-stakeholder committee to implement the recommendations of the study. So ITU is making an arrangement to publish this report so that it can be useful for other countries. So soon I can share with you the link for this document that will be published by ITU. So in that assessment, I was studying the level of restoration plan. If the restoration plan of each network is at the level that can protect the operations of the network during disaster. For example, they have substitute networks, or they have the capacity to repair the networks during disasters. And the second step was to assess the level of resilience, which means that to see if they have redundancy in the network and they can control congestion within the network when there are congestions. We also look at the power issues, because if that is another level of resilience, because if the power is down, so there is no service. So all the stakeholders were part of this. They provided information and they expressed their needs in terms of the way to reinforce, to strengthen the resilience of the networks and infrastructures of telecommunication.
Fantastic. And I guess we look forward to seeing that report, because clearly our countries are so vulnerable. I mean, Nerissa has been based in Montserrat, and Montserrat, in addition to being in the path of hurricanes, had a volcanic eruption and maybe continues to have at least minor eruptions. We had St. Vincent. Jamaica had a major earthquake in September 2023. So we we are continually faced with the fact that we are vulnerable to natural disasters, and even not necessarily just natural disasters, because I think also the pandemic showed us certain vulnerabilities in our networks as well, because when people had to work from home, the capacity on the networks was lacking. And so many of us, there were so many complaints and so on. But Nerissa, let me just hear your thoughts, because I mean, you probably have, certainly some more first-hand and intimate knowledge of what that resilience may mean to you personally and even for your business.
Yeah, one of the things, because I don't have an office, so I can work from anywhere. That's been my goal. Being in Montserrat, and you talked about earthquakes in Jamaica, by the way, and if you've checked, you've seen across the Eastern Caribbean, they've just been a slew of earthquakes. Day after day, you see one. So there's quite a lot of activity happening in the region right now that we have to be concerned about. As we're recording this, Eastern Caribbean is kind of having this very bizarre weather. People were like, is this a hurricane happening? It's kind of early, because it's literally flooding, and it's all this rain and then these temperatures. So we are having all of these experiences, and we are seeing that our networks aren't ready for them. Last summer in Montserrat, we had a major, and it was one of those combination of things. There was an accident. A ship was passing in Antigua and damaged the subsea fiber network that connects to us. And so we were out of internet. At the same time, we were out of internet for about 2 or 3 days before they got up a backup. And at the same time, we were experiencing power outages. I remember for me, we were out for over 24 hours at one period straight. I didn't have in my area. And this lasted for quite a few weeks. So you imagine having no internet and no power. It wasn't very comfortable at all. And of course, you're experiencing it right during hurricane season. So again, stress is heightened because you're wondering what could possibly happen. I think, and then I also saw that several other islands have been experiencing power outages because all of our infrastructures are old. Mm-hmm. So that is another thing. The Caribbean has been playing patchwork with our infrastructures, whether it's because the development agencies aren't giving funding, and often it's because they don't want to give money for maintenance. So they give us money for big toys, but then there's no way to maintain it. And then because national budgets are stretched, we keep delaying things like updates and repairs and things. So you can imagine that whatever we think our infrastructure it is older and has much more risks than we even want to admit, because we have been patching things for so long. So I hope that when the report comes out, it's more than it can't just sit on a desk at this point, because every single country, I think, in the region is vulnerable to some disaster or another, and our resilience has to be tantamount. Otherwise, we're just going to be in even more trouble. We keep going further and further back in our development because we're just not able to bounce back fast enough from these incidents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gregory.
Yeah, thank you, Nerissa, for your comments. So it's very important to consider resilience of networks and infrastructure, because our lives depend on that, and social activities, economic activities, all those things depend on ICT networks and infrastructures. So I was very attentive to your comments. So when you said that a subsea cable was damaged and the internet was cut off in your country, so this kind of situation should be avoided with redundant in the infrastructures. So in Haiti, one of the recommendations is to have those kind of redundancies in the infrastructures. So we also in the study look at the cyber resilience because it's another part of this. So both parts, physical resilience and cyber resilience were considered in the study. So the ITU is putting the cover page. The cover page, so that's take a long time. So I think they will publish it soon, and it can be available. But it was about Haiti, but I think the lessons can be useful for other countries in the Caribbean, especially in the Dominican Republic. When there's a earthquake in Haiti, they feel it too. So this is the same island. So yeah.
Gregory, a couple of things. Because just using that whole submarine cable situation that Nerissa mentioned, how did the report and even you consider countries identifying what might be critical internet resources? Because here it is that oftentimes in our countries, and even for governments sometimes, they have they host certain services outside of the country. And so if, for example, the submarine cable goes down and you don't have any off-island communication, all of your internet goes down because we have none of those resources on island or in country. So that even though, for example, you may not be able to access the wider internet, could you not access government services, pay your taxes, pay for your driver's license or your road license and those sorts of things? Because life still has to go on, and it doesn't make any sense, especially in country where you can use certain services when the internet is running, when you have off-island communication, to do business on island.
Yeah, in Haiti we have only two cables. One is for the incumbent, and the other one is for all. So there are recommendations to protect them in the report. And we also have another connection. Well, two operators have another microwave connection via Dominican Republic. So it is very insufficient if it should be the alternative solution in case the submarine cables should be damaged.
Indeed.
So now there is also another option, which is very limited to few customers. It's a Starlink connection. So I think the government should put more concentration of the submarine cable to protect them in order to guarantee the service, because they don't have, as you said, they don't have a private network within the country that can support services in case of a disruption of those infrastructures.
Indeed.
Gregory, correct me if I'm wrong, but also most countries, most telecom providers now, even if I have a landline in my house, that landline is actually being serviced by internet. It's no longer that old, whether it's copper cable or whatever. So so we don't even have that redundancy of the traditional cable network that used to run through most islands. Everything is now over internet. Am I correct?
Not really, because locally the mobile network they operate independently from internet.
Well, in our country, in our country, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, in our country now, they have removed those traditional lines and everything now. Even if you've got a phone line in your house,
it's wireless.
No, it's different. So the mobile operators in every country, so they operate. They have their own networks within the country that can operate independently of the internet. So for the internet access, they have to be connected to a submarine cable or wireless or microwave links or satellite links. So that's another issue. But the mobile operators, they can own and operate their networks within the country without the connection. If they don't have to provide internet connection. You get the point?
Understood.
Yeah, okay.
Well, ours is it's one and the same. It's we have two providers, but they both do mobile and one does mobile and internet, and the other one does mobile and traditional landline service.
Yeah, the voice service can perform without internet connection.
Right.
Well, no, ours doesn't. Ours, you need internet.
It's an IP, all
yes.
IP.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Okay, I understand. Yeah.
Gregory, well, that's what I think one more question I want to ask. Because, and I think you did talk about just, infrastructure and the importance of, let's say, electricity, because as much as you may have your your internet service operational, there comes a point where you're going to need electricity to power your devices and the equipment and everything. So to what degree in the study did you look at the importance of the supporting infrastructure? I know that you would have examined and highlighted electricity, but especially since I think you said the focus was on some of the focus was on restoration. After a disaster has happened and you now need to restore the network, yes, electricity is one thing, but if the roads have been washed away or you can't use them anymore, then you may not necessarily be able to get to your sites or to your plant or exchange or that area. So just give me a sense as to how did you and maybe even ITU and the grouping that you mentioned think about just the wider supporting infrastructure to allow telecommunications and the internet to work well after disasters?
Yeah, it's a good comment. So there are one interesting thing in Haiti because of the current situation. The operators put staff and equipment in some areas at risk so that they can react, they can give a response at time, because roads can be damaged and no other way to get to the sites, to the infrastructures. So they pre-position people, employees and equipment in some areas in order to be able to respond on time. That's a good thing. And in my recommendations, I support this, and I say they have to reinforce this strategy to pre-position staff and equipment. Regarding the energy issue, so in Haiti, it's a big issue, energy. I think in their data centers, they have 3-4 generators. In some key sites, for example, base station, they have generators on wheel. They have so they can move them, deploy them in some areas that are affected by earthquakes or any other natural disasters. But because energy is a big issue in Haiti, in some parts, we have a lot of sun here. They use solar panel, but in the night, the BTS can't continue running on solar panel. That's why in some rural areas, you might not find services because of electrical power. They stop the service during the night because there is no power and there is not too much demand for the service. So that's the way it is so far. But in the recommendations, I said they have to find a way to improve that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. And I think, it's so important, though, that we continue to examine the resilience of our networks. And I think, unfortunately, certainly, I think in many Caribbean countries where the telecommunication services and operations are privately owned, it may limit the requirements that you can make on the companies because they're making the investment, and it may not always be cost effective. It may be good for the country, but it may not necessarily be cost effective. And there may be need for countries to consider how they might be able to better support the provision of service. I can't tell you the companies because they are private companies and they need to, set their business models in such a way to help them to be profitable. But depending on the requirements that we are asking of the networks, noting that it is so important to our countries for our livelihoods, for life and living and enjoyment and so on, and even, for emergencies and the basics in our societies, we may have to look more closely as to how best we can ensure that the infrastructure is more resilient for the betterment of everyone involved.
Yes, it's a good idea, but that problem should be solved in the license conditions. So when the regulator or the government issue a license for a mobile operator or any kind of operator, they should put the conditions that the minimum of service should be available to anyone. So that will avoid by disruption. I mean, of the service in some areas which doesn't offer too much attractivity. So that's why those problems can be solved in the license conditions.
Absolutely. But I think, Gregory, we're going to have to leave this one there. I could come back at you and challenge you on the licenses, but we will leave it for another time. And just going on to our final topic, which is regulating digital media. And with social media becoming more pervasive and powerful, we have been seeing various threats by government across the region to crack down on social media. Usually the trigger is an allegedly defamatory statement against a public figure. And in the case of Belize, a recent example, viral content involved a prominent figure in a potentially criminal matter. The incident raised concerns about the lack of accountability of digital platforms and their possible influence on public perception and justice, which is a quote from Prensa Latina, and thus the intention of the government to enact legislation that provides, again, a quote, the proper control in the use and management of social media. And, I was thinking about it and say, I am a little concerned. While I do understand government's concern, my question is, can they regulate social media without treading on citizens' rights? Nerissa, let's start with you and then probably hear from Gregory after.
Slippery slope there. And it's why I picked the topic earlier, because I see that it's a growing concern about the interaction between government, social media, and the people. And our social media is allowing our people to feel more powerful in a situation where they feel very disempowered. And so it is the government's responsibility to empower their people. So it means then that you don't take away the thing that's making them feel more powerful. You need to support them in being able to use it more positively and impactfully. Digital literacy is a real concern that I think governments need to put a lot of energy and focus towards. And that also means teaching them how to identify misinformation. So before we talk about trying to regulate it, let's make sure that we've given people as much access to the knowledge they need to learn to understand how to be able to verify whether something is fact or untrue, and what are the processes that they can go through to verify and get information. And so it means then that we can't have outdated government websites. We've got to have clear spaces where people can go and submit complaints, be able to see other complaints that people have submitted and whether they've been rectified. And in that way, when something comes up on social, someone now can say, but that actually isn't true, because here's what actually happened. Here's the information here that we can verify. Also, it goes back again to always wanting to patch things up after the cart is, you'll want to lock the gate after the horse is already outside. No, we've known, we've been watching social media come on board, but we've been saying, of course, it's not that important. It doesn't matter. People, whatever, people will say what they want to say. And so now when the conversations aren't in our favor is when we suddenly say, oh, tighten it, tighten it, tighten it. No, we have to think, how can we use this tool to better inform our people and give our people the ability to powerfully engage with us in a way that they know we are listening and we're taking on board what they say, and they can see that we are doing that. For me, that is what I want to see more of, not regulate social. I would say, though, I do understand the need when it comes around news, in that everybody now can be a source of news. Because even if I wasn't a journalist by profession, if I have a desire to share information about my island, I'll say, guess what? The hurricane passed through and we don't have any power. And I'm sharing that because I have people in my network all over the world who are interested in what's happening in my island. And suddenly I keep doing that, and suddenly I become a source of information, and people, and I become I suppose, news influencer in that regard. So I do think there needs to be some management, and I use that carefully, because I think sometimes it could be simply that you go to all of the people that you see are having these, that have this influence, and you say, hi, we would love to work with you to make sure that you are sharing positive information, and here are some ways that we can do that for you. Whether it's if you do have questions, because they're always the first to hear stuff, and be able to come back and say, before you go out there and say, oh, you hear that so and so minister did that, would you be willing to run it through us, or to ask us to confirm if that is the case? And then you do that, because again, I don't think we're going to be able to say, oh, he's not a real media house. I think all of those days are gone. But we do need to then say, all right, we respect the fact that you do have a voice. It is your right to use this voice. How can we help you do your work better so that you are actually sharing information that is valid? The question is then going to be raised, is this person interested in actually sharing the truth, or they just like the attention that they get from being negative? Because we do know there are some people who specialize in their and Caribbean people, we got away with words, and they can say a lot in one sentence, and you're like, what did they just say? Who they talking about there? You understand? So it is a dance. I don't think just outright regulation is the answer. Again, it has to be more communication. It has to be looking at how can we support the people that are already using this positively to do more of it, to help them be better at it, and how can we educate our people to be more digitally literate, being able to understand there's a lot of misinformation out there, and the first response shouldn't be, I believe this is the truth, I believe the government isn't telling us the truth, but here is somewhere I can go to verify whether that information I just saw online is true or not.
Definitely.
Yeah, I understand. I agree with your comments, Nerissa. But I think social media, regulating social media is an issue for every regulator, every ministry, because this has a worldwide connection, because the infrastructure which supports the social media is not national. So the users can be anywhere and use it to influence activities in a given country. So trying to regulate social media is like attracting more people to use it, because to use it in the bad way.
Sure.
Because it's like you put a challenge, and they will respond, and the response will be negative. So I think the government and regulators, they can count on a group of people that use those tools efficiently to influence other people to use it in the best way. Because trying to put rules on this, that will attract more people to use it in the bad way. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And I mean, I think with this, the thing that social media has done, good or bad, is that it has really democratized. It has opened up just our own personal empowerment, because oftentimes I want to say news, but I don't even think that is the right term. Just information would have very specific avenues that it would come through. Word of mouth, the newspaper, TV, radio, right? But here with social media, information, I think, just flows a lot faster, because it probably is, for example, in the case of Belize and that situation that seems to at least came up recently. It was a prominent figure. I think it might have been somebody, not necessarily a political figure, but someone who may have a certain influence within the society. And they, for all intents and purposes, were found in a compromising position, but there was some potentially criminal aspects to it. And you may have heard it, word on the street is that this happened, right? But there is now, as one might say, receipts. There is footage of the situation. And that, I think, heightens everything. It's no longer just rumor, and you can disregard where it came from and you just move on. But now we have an opportunity, and we live in a space, a time where, my phone in particular, for example, becomes just a very powerful tool, because I can record, I can share it with my groups, and it just trickles on from there, or snowballs from there, based on just how it, prominent and intense the content is. So, I really think, though, that we have to be careful as societies when we want to clamp down on certain things. And there are rules already in place. You have defamation and libel laws and so on already in place. But then trying to regulate the social media platforms, for all intents and purposes, which often do not reside in your jurisdiction, seems a little bit difficult to actually successfully implement. So, I think we have to manage the maturity and the empowerment of our people. And probably, at least, I could understand maybe in this what could be a potential criminal matter, that I've forgotten the phrase, because the public has already cast judgment on the situation, the person may not get a fair trial because everybody has their own preconceived notions, but there are other ways that the situation can be managed. So yeah.
I think we need to see probably more people get taken to court for sharing information that's not theirs to share, or recording somebody without their permission, because you really should record, ask people's permission. One of the things that I did years ago when I first started on social in Montserrat, I covered a lot of events, and especially with children, and I had to learn to step back. It's like, no, these aren't my kids, and somebody may not want their child on social, and I had to learn how to, and eventually I stopped, because I recognized I didn't have permission to be taking people's kids' photos and posting them online without their permission. And so it was very important that people were aware that if they're at an event, and that's why you now see disclaimer signs, this event is being live streamed. If you come in here, you're going to be photographed. That way people know if I'm in a particular space, my photo could end up on Facebook or whatever. But if I haven't given you permission to record me and things like that, it's wrong, and I could take you to court. And I would love to see more people have to go that route, to be able to restrict them from just thinking, oh, the public has a right to know. No, that's my private stuff. You didn't need to say. You didn't need to share that. But yeah, it's going to be very hard to regulate entities that are outside of our country. And now that we have things like AI, deep fakes and the ability to just create things with nothing, out of thin air almost. How can you decide that I created this thing in this country? Are we going to regulate the world?
No, yeah, it's true. But so in my point of view, I think governments and regulators can set up awareness campaign to tell people that the risk and threats they can meet in using social media instead of trying to put a kind of regulation. So I mean that will be the soft way to do it instead of the hard way. That's my opinion on this.
Yeah. But Nerissa, I really appreciated what you said about getting the permissions and having the whole issue of privacy, because that also, is part of, I think, some of the sort of legislative reforms and developments that our countries need to appreciate. Because some of our countries have been promulgating data protection acts, and it may talk about, what is private information and how, but often in a sort of business setting, whether it's private sector or public sector. But as you say, and I think like there are in some countries, I can think of like South Korea in particular, where you can't just film somebody without their permission and certainly not broadcast it. And this then, it may be the fact that, of course, even though something may be questionable in terms of the footage that you're filming and what is transpiring may be questionable, something that might be concerning. It may not be as responsible to just broadcast it where everybody is visible.
Right.
And we need to probably be a little bit more responsible and mindful about that going forward. And that may be just be an excellent way to even address that issue in some degree.
Yeah, I think because we're, again, in the Caribbean, we're pretty much a free for all. Everybody takes things easy, nothing that serious, you know what I mean? But it is that serious. And I think we now need some boundaries that we have and expectations for people who want to present themselves as a media house or a blogger. There has to be some boundaries that you're willing to work within, so that we can, and so that you can have a standard as well and say, oh, we would never publish that. People know that if they see certain things online, it wasn't me. Or they would go and say, hey, you know what, let me go to her platform to see if she confirmed this thing. Otherwise, they don't believe it. Because you want to build a reputation, a standard that people have an expectation that this is how it's supposed to operate. And anything that operates outside of that is not the standard and unacceptable. So I think there is some room to create some boundaries and expectations of people who want to represent themselves as bloggers, journalists, anybody who is sharing information with the public. There needs to be some boundaries. And in the absence of that, they definitely should, the law should definitely come into play.
Fantastic. Folks, I think we're going to leave it there. We have blown past the time allocated. But just thank you so much for joining us and for having, helping us to have these interesting conversations. Network resiliency, regulating social media, and just use of social media to really help us to develop and strengthen our communities and engagement with one another, I think are just such important issues. And I think very just insightful conversations that we've had today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for always sparking the conversation, Michelle. I really appreciate you and having the opportunity to be here. Gregory, I always think I don't have anything to say when it comes to the hard side of tech, but I guess I have to use it. And so there is impact when, those things aren't happening. So thank you so much for the conversation today.
Yeah, thank you, Nerissa. Thank you, Michelle, for the invitation. So I will be available for the next chat like this.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. The music is from the composition The Last Word, We Ma Chérie by Andy Narrell. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a 5-star review, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on social media at ICT Pulse, either on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.